A lost baby was on the train tracks. What this mother bear did to save him left everyone in tears. Where you're watching from, let us know in the comments. Most of you are loving our stories, but forget to subscribe. It costs you nothing, but it's very helpful for us. The morning mist hung low over the train tracks that cut through the dense forest. The air was cold and damp, making every sound echo strangely through the trees. In the distance, a train whistle pierced the silence, its warning cry growing louder with each passing second. Little Tommy, not even 2 years old, stood wobbling on the steel rails. His tiny feet struggled to balance on the cold metal as tears streaked down his dirt-covered face. The worn fabric of his blue onesie offered little protection against the morning chill. He had wandered away from the family's campsite while his mother Clara was packing up their tent, and now he was lost and scared. The ground began to tremble beneath Tommy's feet. The distant rumble of the approaching train grew stronger, sending vibrations through the metal tracks. Tommy didn't understand the danger. He only knew he was alone and frightened, his small hands clutching at the empty air as if searching for his mother's familiar touch. Through the thick morning fog, a massive shadow emerged from between the trees. At first, it moved slowly, cautiously. Then, as the train's whistle blasted again, closer now, the shadow took form. It was a mother bear, her dark fur glistening with morning dew. Her powerful muscles rippled as she moved, but there was something unusual in her eyes. Not the wild ferocity one might expect, but a deep, almost knowing look. The bear paused at the edge of the tree line, her gaze fixed on Tommy. The train's headlight cut through the mist behind him, casting long shadows across the tracks. The massive locomotive was bearing down on them, its metal wheels screeching against the rails. The conductor had spotted the small figure on the tracks and was desperately pulling the emergency brake, but the train's momentum made stopping impossible. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The bear's eyes met Tommy's, and in that brief connection, something extraordinary happened. Perhaps she recognized the vulnerability in his tiny form, or maybe she was remembering her own cubs. Whatever the reason, she made a decision that would defy everything we think we know about wild animals. With surprising gentleness for such a powerful creature, the bear lunged forward. Her movements were precise, calculated. The train was mere seconds away when she reached Tommy. Using her mouth with incredible care, she gripped the back of his onesie. In one fluid motion, she swept him off the tracks, her powerful body twisting to shield him as the train thundered past, so close that the wind from its passing ruffled their fur and clothes. The sound was deafening, the ground shaking violently as the massive machine roared by. But Tommy was safe, cradled against the bear's chest, protected from both the noise and the turbulent air. As the last car cleared the crossing, the bear gently set Tommy down on the soft forest floor, a safe distance from the tracks. She sniffed him carefully, checking for any injuries, her warm breath ruffling his hair. The bear's behavior became even more remarkable in the moments that followed. Instead of returning to the forest, she settled down beside Tommy, her large body creating a protective barrier between him and the cold morning air. She seemed to understand that a lost cub, even a human one, needed more than just rescue. It needed comfort and protection until its mother could be found. Meanwhile, deeper in the forest, Clara was living every mother's worst nightmare. She had turned away for just a moment while folding the tent, and in that brief span of time, Tommy had disappeared. Her heart pounding against her ribs, she had been searching frantically for the past hour, calling his name until her voice grew hoarse. The sound of the train's emergency whistle had sent a chill of terror through her body, and she had started running toward the tracks, branches whipping against her face as she pushed through the undergrowth. The early morning light filtered through the canopy, casting dappled shadows that seemed to dance mockingly around her. Clara's feet caught on twisted roots and fallen branches, but she barely noticed the scrapes and bruises forming on her legs. Her mind was filled with terrible images of what might have happened to her baby. When she heard the train thundering past, the sound nearly stopped her heart. But something deep inside, a mother's instinct perhaps, drove her to keep moving forward. The bear's ears perked up at the sound of branches breaking and leaves rustling. She could smell a human approaching, an adult female whose scent carried the same underlying notes as the child's. The bear's own maternal instincts told her this must be the cub's mother. Still, she remained vigilant, her powerful body tensed to protect Tommy if necessary. Clara burst through the tree line, her hair wild and tangled with leaves, her clothes torn from running through the thick forest undergrowth. She stopped abruptly, her eyes widening in disbelief at the scene before her. There was her son, sitting safely on the ground, and next to him, impossibly, incredibly, sat a massive bear. The morning sunlight had begun to break through the mist, surrounding them in a golden glow that made the moment seem almost magical. For a heartbeat, Clara stood frozen, her maternal instinct warring with her fear. The bear could easily kill them both with a single swipe of her massive paw. But something in the animal's posture, in the gentle way she sat beside Tommy, told Clara this was no ordinary encounter. She watched in amazement as Tommy reached out a tiny hand and patted the bear's fur, giggling as if this were the most natural thing in the world. The bear's eyes met Clara's, and in that moment a profound understanding passed between them. Two mothers, different species but united by the universal instinct to protect the young and vulnerable. The bear slowly stood up, her movements deliberately gentle to avoid frightening either the child or his mother. She took a few steps back, creating space for the reunion she seemed to know was coming. Clara rushed forward, tears streaming down her face as she scooped Tommy into her arms. She held him close, breathing in his familiar baby scent mixed with the earthy smell of the forest. "My baby, my precious baby," she whispered over and over, her voice thick with emotion. Tommy snuggled into her embrace, babbling happily as if he hadn't just been at the center of a miracle. The bear watched this reunion with what could only be described as gentle satisfaction. She remained still, her massive form silhouetted against the brightening morning sky. The sun had risen higher now, burning away the last wisps of mist and illuminating the scene in crystal clarity. The steel tracks gleamed behind them, a stark reminder of how close they had come to tragedy. The bear's dark eyes seemed to hold ancient wisdom as she observed the mother and child, her own breathing slow and steady in the morning air. A new sound drifted through the trees, voices calling out, flashlight beams cutting through the remaining shadows. Clara's desperate flight through the forest hadn't gone unnoticed. Park rangers and local search volunteers had mobilized quickly when they heard about the missing toddler. Now they approached the scene, their calls growing louder with each passing moment. The bear's ears twitched at the sound, but she showed no sign of aggression or fear. Marcus Chen, the lead park ranger, was the first to emerge from the tree line. He stopped so abruptly that Sarah Williams, his fellow ranger, nearly crashed into him. The scene before them defied everything they had learned about wild animal behavior in their combined 30 years of experience. Sarah raised her tranquilizer rifle instinctively, but Marcus gently pushed it down. Something extraordinary was happening here, and he knew in his gut that any intervention would only shatter this mysterious moment. The bear slowly turned her head to acknowledge the newcomers, but her body remained relaxed. If anything, she seemed to be waiting for something. Clara, still holding Tommy tightly, found her voice at last. "She saved him," she said, her words barely above a whisper, but carrying clearly in the morning stillness. "There was a train coming, and she saved my baby." Her voice broke on the last words, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. The bear rose to her full height then, her movements smooth and unhurried. She was magnificent, nearly 8 feet tall when standing, her fur catching the sunlight like dark silk. She took one last look at Tommy, who was watching her with wide, wondering eyes. Then, with the same deliberate grace that had marked all her actions, she turned toward the forest. But before she disappeared into the trees, she did something that would be discussed and debated for years to come. She paused at the edge of the clearing and looked back over her shoulder. Then she made a soft huffing sound, almost like a sigh, and dipped her head once, a gesture so human-like that everyone present felt a shiver run down their spine. It was as if she was saying goodbye or perhaps giving her blessing to the child she had saved. Then she melted into the forest shadows, leaving behind a group of humans forever changed by what they had witnessed. The story of what happened that morning spread quickly through the nearby town of Pine Valley. Local news crews arrived within hours, their cameras and microphones eager to capture every detail of the miracle on the train tracks. But Clara found herself struggling to put the experience into words. How could she explain the look in the bear's eyes, the gentle intelligence she had witnessed? How could she describe the profound connection she had felt with this wild creature who had chosen to save her child? Tommy, too young to understand the significance of what had happened, nevertheless seemed marked by the experience. In the days that followed, Clara noticed how he would often stop and stare into the forest with a peculiar expression on his face. When they looked through picture books together, he would point excitedly at any bears they encountered, making the same soft huffing sound they had heard that morning. It was as if some part of him remembered and understood the magnitude of what had occurred. The transformation of Pine Valley began almost immediately after the incident. The small mountain town, previously known only for its hiking trails and seasonal tourism, suddenly found itself at the center of worldwide attention. News crews from major networks set up their equipment in the modest town square, their satellite trucks looking oddly out of place against the backdrop of old brick buildings and family-owned shops. Local residents watched with a mixture of amazement and protective concern as their quiet community became the focus of an international conversation about the relationship between humans and wildlife. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a renowned wildlife behaviorist from the University of Colorado, arrived within days of the incident. She had studied bear behavior for over 2 decades, but nothing in her research had prepared her for this case. "What we're seeing here," she explained to a captivated audience at the Pine Valley Community Center, "challenges everything we thought we knew about ursine cognitive capabilities and emotional intelligence. This wasn't just instinct, this was decision-making on a level we've never documented in wild bears." Clara found herself deeply affected by Dr. Rodriguez's words. Late at night, after Tommy was asleep in his bed, now surrounded by stuffed bears of every size and color, gifts from well-wishers around the world, she would sit by his window and look out at the forest. The moon cast long shadows through the trees, and sometimes she thought she could see a large, dark shape moving among them. Was it their bear? She had begun thinking of the animal as theirs, though she knew that wasn't quite right. The bear belonged to no one but herself. The incident sparked an unexpected movement in Pine Valley. Mayor Robert Thompson, who had initially worried about the impact on tourism, found himself presiding over a complete revision of the town's wildlife management policies. The old protocols, focused primarily on keeping bears away from human settlements, were replaced with more nuanced approaches that recognized the intelligence and complexity of these magnificent creatures. Marcus Chen, the park ranger who had witnessed the aftermath of the rescue, became an unexpected voice for change. His daily patrols took on new meaning as he worked to document and protect the bear populations in the area. He noted behavioral patterns that had gone unrecognized before, subtle signs of intelligence and social complexity that many had overlooked. "That mother bear," he would often say, "she opened our eyes to what was here all along." Tommy's third birthday party, celebrated 6 months after the incident, became an unofficial town holiday. The local bakery created a special cake decorated with carefully crafted fondant bears. Children from Tommy's daycare center performed a play they had written themselves, telling the story of the brave mother bear who saved a little boy. Clara watched her son clap and laugh during the performance, his eyes shining with joy. He wore the same blue onesie from that morning, carefully cleaned and preserved, now framed in a shadow box on their living room wall. But perhaps the most profound change was the one that occurred in the forest itself. The area around the train tracks, once simply a boundary between wilderness and civilization, became something of a sacred space. Local artists created a beautiful bronze sculpture of a mother bear and a human child, placing it near the spot where the rescue had occurred. The plaque beneath it read simply, "To the mother who crossed boundaries, with gratitude." Dr. Rodriguez's team, which had set up a permanent research station nearby, documented something remarkable in the months that followed. The local bear population, particularly the females with cubs, seemed to have developed a unique pattern of behavior. They maintained their natural wariness of humans, but there was a notable absence of aggressive encounters. It was as if the memory of that morning had rippled through the entire forest community, creating a new understanding between species. One crisp autumn morning, almost exactly a year after the rescue, Clara took Tommy for a walk along the newly established nature trail that paralleled the train tracks. The path had been carefully designed to allow safe viewing of wildlife while maintaining respectful distances. As they reached the bronze sculpture, Tommy suddenly grew very still. Clara followed his gaze into the misty forest and caught her breath. There, standing at the edge of the trees, was a massive bear with 2 cubs at her side. Though it was impossible to know for certain, Clara felt in her heart that this was their bear. The morning air was crisp and still, holding that special quality of silence that comes only in the moments of profound significance. The bear's cubs tumbled playfully around her feet, their dark fur gleaming in the dappled sunlight that filtered through the autumn leaves. They were young, perhaps only a few months old, and their innocent energy reminded Clara so much of Tommy at that age. The mother bear stood perfectly still, her deep brown eyes fixed on Clara and Tommy with that same intelligent gaze that had haunted Clara's dreams for the past year. Tommy, now a sturdy 3-year-old with wild curls and bright eyes, showed no fear. Instead, he squeezed his mother's hand and made that familiar huffing sound, the same sound they had heard on that fateful morning. To Clara's amazement, the mother bear responded with an identical sound, her breath visible in the cool morning air. The cubs stopped their play, looking curiously at Tommy as if they sensed something special in this exchange between their mother and the human child she had once saved. Dr. Rodriguez, who had been following at a discreet distance with her research team, quickly began documenting the interaction. Her hands trembled slightly as she operated her camera, capturing what she would later describe as one of the most significant moments in the study of human-wildlife relationships. The bear's behavior, calm, deliberate, and seemingly purposeful, defied conventional scientific understanding. This wasn't just a random encounter, it felt more like a reunion. The bear took a few steps forward, her movements graceful despite her massive size. She stopped at the edge of the observation area, close enough for them to see the silver tips of her fur catching the morning light. Her cubs stayed close behind her, their small faces full of curiosity rather than fear. One of them, slightly braver than its sibling, stood up on its hind legs to get a better look at Tommy, mirroring the way human children often stretch to see something interesting. Clara felt tears rolling down her cheeks as she watched the scene unfold. The bronze sculpture beside them seemed to take on new meaning in the presence of its living inspiration. The plaque's words about crossing boundaries had never felt more true than in this moment, as they stood in this liminal space between the wild and the civilized world, between instinct and consciousness, between what we think we know about animals and what they are truly capable of. Sarah Williams, who had recently been promoted to head ranger of the Pine Valley Wildlife Management Area, had developed a theory about the bear's behavior. "We've been tracking this particular bear for months now," she explained later that evening at an emergency meeting of the Wildlife Commission. "She's shown remarkable intelligence in teaching her cubs about human settlements, not just how to avoid them, but how to coexist with them. It's as if she's passing on the wisdom she gained from her experience with Tommy." The encounter had lasted only a few minutes, but its impact would resonate for years to come. As the bear prepared to lead her cubs back into the deeper forest, she performed that same deliberate head-dipping gesture they had witnessed a year ago. This time, though, her cubs imitated her, creating a moment so powerful that even the most skeptical members of Dr. Rodriguez's research team found themselves blinking back tears. The story of the bear's return spread through Pine Valley like wildfire, adding a new chapter to what had already become local legend. The town council voted unanimously to establish the Mother Bear Wildlife Sanctuary, a protected corridor of land that would ensure safe passage for wildlife between the mountain ranges. The sanctuary would include carefully designed observation areas where people could safely watch and learn from these remarkable creatures, while maintaining the respectful distance that both species needed. Tommy's reaction to the encounter revealed how deeply the original event had affected him, even at his young age. That evening, he sat at his little art table and drew picture after picture of bears. Not just any bears, but specific ones. The mother and her cubs, rendered with surprising detail for a 3-year-old. Clara watched as he carefully added silver tips to the mother bear's fur, just as they had seen that morning. When she asked him about the drawings, he spoke with the simple wisdom of a child. "She remembered me, Mommy. She wanted her babies to know me too." The scientific community struggled to categorize what had happened. Dr. Rodriguez's paper on the incident and its aftermath sparked heated debates in academic circles. Some researchers argued that attributing such complex emotional intelligence to a wild animal was anthropomorphizing, projecting human characteristics onto animal behavior. Others saw it as evidence that humans had vastly underestimated the cognitive and emotional capabilities of wild animals, particularly in species with strong maternal instincts. The years that followed brought changes that no one could have predicted. Tommy's early experiences with the bear shaped his life in profound ways. By the time he entered elementary school, he had developed an extraordinary sensitivity to animals that went beyond simple childish enthusiasm. His first-grade teacher, Ms. Rebecca Martinez, noticed how other children naturally followed his lead when it came to treating animals with respect and understanding. During nature walks, Tommy could spot wildlife that others missed, and he seemed to instinctively understand how to behave around different creatures. Clara watched her son's development with a mixture of wonder and gratitude. The trauma that could have marked his early childhood had instead transformed into something beautiful. She often found him sitting quietly in their backyard, observing squirrels, birds, and other wildlife with remarkable patience. When asked about it, he would simply say, "They're trying to tell us something, Mom. We just have to learn how to listen." The Mother Bear Wildlife Sanctuary became an internationally recognized center for the study of animal intelligence and emotional behavior. Dr. Rodriguez established a permanent research facility there, drawing scientists and students from around the world. They developed new methodologies for studying wild animals that emphasized observation over intervention, respect over control. The results were groundbreaking. One particularly fascinating discovery came from long-term observation of the bear population. The mother bear who had saved Tommy appeared to have influenced not just her own cubs, but an entire generation of bears in the region. The research team documented complex social behaviors that had never been recorded before. Bears working cooperatively to solve problems, showing emotional responses to the distress of others, and demonstrating what appeared to be intentional communication with humans through body language and vocalizations. Sarah Williams, now the director of the sanctuary, worked closely with Tommy as he grew older. By the age of 10, he had become something of an unofficial junior ranger, sharing his unique perspective with visitors from around the world. "Tommy has this gift," Sarah explained during a documentary interview. "He can read animal behavior in a way that even experienced researchers sometimes miss. It's as if that morning on the tracks opened up a channel of understanding that most of us have lost." The bronze sculpture that marked the site of the original rescue became known as the heart of the sanctuary. People traveled from across the globe to leave offerings there. Not just flowers and notes, but promises written on biodegradable paper, pledges to work toward a better relationship with the natural world. The pile of promises grew so large that the sanctuary staff began collecting them in special books, creating a library of hope and transformation. Clara's life took an unexpected turn as well. Her experience led her to pursue a degree in environmental law, and she became a powerful advocate for wildlife protection legislation. Her testimony before Congress about the morning her son was saved brought hardened politicians to tears and helped pass groundbreaking conservation laws. "We need to reimagine our relationship with the wild," she would often say in her speeches. Not as something to be feared or conquered, but as something to be understood and respected. The train company that operated on those tracks implemented new safety protocols, installing advanced wildlife detection systems and reducing speeds through known animal corridors. They named this initiative the Tommy Protocol, and it became a model for railway systems worldwide. The number of animal casualties on train tracks dropped dramatically, and there were unexpected economic benefits as well. Fewer accidents meant less damage to equipment and fewer delays. On Tommy's 13th birthday, something extraordinary happened that seemed to bring the story full circle. He and Clara were walking along their favorite trail in the sanctuary when they encountered a young bear struggling with a tangle of old fishing line wrapped around its paw. Instead of running or showing fear, the bear sat down and waited, as if it knew help was available. Under the supervision of sanctuary staff, Tommy was allowed to approach. With steady hands and gentle words, he helped free the bear, which calmly accepted his assistance before ambling back into the forest. The incident with the tangled fishing line marked a turning point in Tommy's life. Local news coverage of his gentle rescue went viral, bringing renewed attention to the extraordinary story of his own rescue years before. Scientists studying animal behavior were particularly intrigued by how the young bear had seemed to actively seek human assistance, displaying a level of trust that defied conventional understanding of wild animal behavior. As Tommy entered his teenage years, his unique connection with wildlife deepened in unexpected ways. He began spending more time at the sanctuary's research center, working alongside Dr. Rodriguez and her team. His natural ability to interpret animal behavior proved invaluable in their studies. He could often predict how animals would react in certain situations, leading to breakthroughs in understanding wildlife response patterns. The scientific community began referring to this inexplicable ability as the Thompson effect, named after Tommy. Clara watched her son's growing influence with a mixture of pride and amazement. The little boy who had once stood helpless on the train tracks had grown into a passionate advocate for wildlife conservation. She remembered one particular evening when Tommy, now 15, was invited to give a presentation at the annual International Wildlife Conservation Conference in Geneva. Standing before an audience of world-renowned scientists and conservationists, he spoke with the wisdom of someone far beyond his years. "The bear who saved me that morning didn't just save one life," Tommy had said, his voice steady and clear in the packed auditorium. "She saved thousands of animals by showing us what's possible when we open our hearts to understanding wildlife. Every bear cub that grows up safely in our sanctuary, every wolf that finds safe passage through our wildlife corridors, every creature that benefits from our new understanding, they're all part of her legacy." The Mother Bear Sanctuary continued to evolve, becoming a model for wildlife conservation worldwide. The research facility expanded to include a state-of-the-art veterinary hospital specializing in treating injured wildlife. Dr. Jessica Chen, Marcus's daughter, who had been inspired by the bear's story to become a wildlife veterinarian, headed the medical team. Under her leadership, they developed revolutionary techniques for rehabilitating injured animals while maintaining their wild instincts. The original mother bear's influence continued to ripple through the local bear population in fascinating ways. Her descendants, identified through DNA testing and tracking, showed remarkably sophisticated social behaviors. Dr. Rodriguez's team documented multiple instances of bears appearing to deliberately avoid human conflict, and even more surprisingly, cases of bears seemingly guiding lost hikers back to marked trails, always from a safe distance, but with clear intentionality. Pine Valley itself transformed from a quiet mountain town into a global center for wildlife research and conservation education. The local school system developed a unique curriculum that integrated wildlife studies into every subject. Students learned mathematics through studying animal population dynamics, writing through nature observation journals, and science through hands-on conservation projects. The program was so successful that educators from around the world came to study their methods. Tommy's 16th birthday celebration became an unexpected moment of revelation. During a quiet morning walk in the sanctuary with Clara, they encountered an elderly bear that caught their attention. She moved slowly but deliberately, her fur now streaked with gray, but her eyes held that same intelligent gaze they remembered so well. DNA testing later confirmed what they had felt in their hearts. This was indeed their bear, now in her final years. The reunion was peaceful and profound. The old bear sat calmly nearby as Tommy and Clara shared their morning snack, maintaining a respectful distance but clearly choosing to remain in their presence. They noticed several younger bears watching from the tree line, likely her grandcubs or great-grandcubs, learning from her example even in her twilight years. This encounter sparked a new initiative at the sanctuary. Tommy proposed creating a detailed family tree of their bear's lineage, tracking how her unique behaviors and apparent intelligence had been passed down through generations. The project, which combined DNA analysis with behavioral studies, revealed fascinating patterns of inherited traits that challenged existing theories about animal learning and adaptation. The international scientific community had to create new categories of animal intelligence to account for what they were observing in Pine Valley. Traditional models of wildlife behavior couldn't explain the sophisticated social structures and problem-solving abilities being documented. Dr. Rodriguez published a groundbreaking paper titled Transgenerational Wisdom in Ursine Populations, the Pine Valley Paradigm, which became required reading in wildlife biology programs worldwide. The discovery of the elderly mother bear's continued presence in the sanctuary led to a series of remarkable observations that would forever change our understanding of animal consciousness. In the months following Tommy's 16th birthday encounter, research teams documented behaviors that suggested a level of self-awareness previously thought impossible in non-primate species. The old bear began making regular appearances at the sanctuary's observation points, often accompanied by younger bears who seemed to be learning from her example. During one particularly memorable autumn morning, Dr. Rodriguez's team captured footage of an extraordinary event. The elderly bear appeared to be actively teaching a group of younger bears about safe crossing points along the railway tracks. She demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of train schedules, waiting for specific times before leading the group across. More remarkably, she showed them how to use the newly installed wildlife warning systems, sensors that triggered flashing lights when trains were approaching. She would pause deliberately by each sensor, waiting for the younger bears to observe and understand its function. Tommy, now approaching his 17th birthday, spent countless hours observing these teaching sessions. His detailed field notes, written with a perspective unique to someone who had experienced the bear's intelligence firsthand, provided invaluable insights into Ursine cognitive development. "She's not just passing on survival skills," he explained during a presentation at Harvard University's Department of Evolutionary Biology. "She's teaching them about coexistence with humans. It's a kind of wisdom that goes beyond simple instinct or learned behavior." Clara had also evolved in her role as an environmental advocate. Her law firm, specializing in wildlife protection and conservation, had successfully lobbied for the passage of the Interspecies Intelligence Protection Act, groundbreaking legislation that recognized and protected animals demonstrating advanced cognitive abilities. The act, nicknamed the Bears Law by the media, established new protocols for human-wildlife interaction, and set aside vast tracts of land as protected corridors for animal movement. The international scientific community continued to be transformed by the ongoing discoveries at Pine Valley. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, collaborating with neurobiologists from universities worldwide, initiated a non-invasive study of bear brain activity using advanced imaging techniques. The results were astounding. When the elderly mother bear was shown images of Tommy as a toddler, her brain activity patterns matched those associated with long-term memory and emotional processing in humans. This suggested not only recognition, but also emotional attachment, a finding that challenged fundamental assumptions about the capacity for cross-species bonding. As the original mother bear entered her final years, she began exhibiting behavior that seemed almost ceremonial. She would make regular visits to the bronze sculpture that commemorated her rescue of Tommy, often sitting quietly beside it for hours. Young bears would gather at a respectful distance, observing her in what appeared to be a form of social learning. Dr. Jessica Chen, who had been monitoring the bear's health, noted that despite her advanced age, she maintained remarkable clarity and purpose in her actions. The sanctuary established a special observation blind near the sculpture, allowing researchers to document these visits without disturbing the bears. Tommy spent many hours in this blind, sketching and writing in his journal. His observations led to a groundbreaking paper co-authored with Dr. Rodriguez titled Ritual Behavior and Intergenerational Knowledge Transfer in Ursus americanus, a case study in evolved intelligence. One crisp morning in late autumn, just as the first snow began to dust the mountains, something extraordinary occurred. The elderly bear made her way to the sculpture, moving slowly but deliberately. She was accompanied by an unprecedented gathering of bears, dozens of them, representing multiple generations of her descendants. What followed was what Dr. Rodriguez would later describe as a demonstration of conscious legacy. For several hours, the gathered bears observed as the elderly matriarch moved through a series of behaviors that appeared to recreate aspects of Tommy's rescue. She approached the train tracks, demonstrated safe crossing techniques, and showed through careful movements how to carry and protect something precious. The younger bears watched with focused attention, many of them making the same gentle huffing sound that had become associated with human-bear interactions in the sanctuary. As winter approached, the elderly bear's visits to the sculpture became more frequent. Dr. Rodriguez theorized that she was engaged in a deliberate process of knowledge transfer, ensuring that her understanding of human interaction would survive beyond her lifetime. The research team documented how younger bears would approach her during these sessions, each one receiving what appeared to be individualized instruction through a complex series of movements, sounds, and demonstrations. Tommy, now preparing for his college applications with plans to study wildlife biology, spent every moment he could at the sanctuary. He noticed subtle changes in the elderly bear's behavior that others might have missed. "She's not just teaching them about survival," he explained to his mother one evening as they sat in their favorite observation blind. "She's showing them how to be bridges between our worlds." Each lesson seems carefully chosen to demonstrate both caution and connection. The international scientific community had gathered in Pine Valley for an unprecedented symposium on ursine intelligence, when nature herself decided to provide the most compelling demonstration yet. On a cold December morning, as the first heavy snow of winter blanketed the sanctuary, the elderly bear made her final journey to the bronze sculpture. She was accompanied by what appeared to be every bear in the region, a gathering so extraordinary that it defied statistical probability. Dr. Jessica Chen, monitoring the event through thermal imaging equipment, observed something remarkable. The assembled bears arranged themselves in a pattern that precisely mimicked the family trees the research team had documented through DNA analysis. The oldest bears, direct descendants of the original mother, formed an inner circle around her, while subsequent generations created expanding rings outward. The formation was so precise that it could not be attributed to chance. The elderly bear moved slowly through the gathering, stopping briefly before each of her direct descendants. At each pause, she would make the huffing sound that had become synonymous with the sanctuary's unique bear-human relationship, and each descendant would respond in kind. Dr. Rodriguez's audio equipment captured these exchanges, revealing subtle variations in pitch and duration that suggested a level of linguistic complexity previously unknown in ursine vocalizations. As the morning progressed, something extraordinary occurred. The elderly bear made her way to the bronze sculpture one last time. She settled beside it with a grace that belied her age, positioning herself in a way that mirrored the pose of the statue. Then, in a moment that brought tears to the eyes of even the most skeptical researchers, she began what could only be described as a storytelling session. Through a series of vocalizations, movements, and gestures, she appeared to be recounting the story of Tommy's rescue. The younger bears watched with focused attention as she demonstrated the careful mouth grip she had used to lift the toddler, the precise timing of her leap from the tracks, and the protective positioning that had kept him safe from the train's turbulence. Each movement was deliberate, each gesture laden with meaning. Clara, watching from the observation blind with Tommy, found herself overwhelmed by emotion. The bear's demonstration brought back vivid memories of that morning on the tracks, but now she understood it in a new light. This wasn't just a random act of instinct. It had been a conscious choice that would reshape the relationship between humans and wildlife for generations to come. The scientific implications of this final gathering were staggering. Dr. Rodriguez's team documented clear evidence of what they termed transgenerational knowledge transfer, the deliberate passing of complex learned behaviors from one generation to the next. The gathered bears showed synchronized responses to specific vocalizations, suggesting a level of social coordination that went far beyond simple mimicry or instinct. As the winter sun began to set on that remarkable December day, the elderly bear remained in her position by the bronze sculpture, her breathing growing slower and more peaceful. The gathered bears maintained their circular formation, creating a protective boundary that seemed to pulse with shared understanding. Dr. Rodriguez's team, monitoring through their sophisticated equipment, recorded what they would later describe as a symphony of communication, layers of vocalizations that created complex patterns of call and response. Tommy, who had remained motionless in the observation blind for hours, suddenly felt compelled to move. With a certainty that came from years of understanding these remarkable creatures, he knew what he needed to do. Clara, recognizing the look in her son's eyes, didn't try to stop him. Dr. Rodriguez, breaking with standard protocol, gave a silent nod of approval. This moment transcended ordinary research parameters. Moving slowly and deliberately, Tommy emerged from the blind and approached the gathering. The bears parted to create a path, their behavior demonstrating an extraordinary level of trust and understanding. As he reached the inner circle, the elderly bear lifted her head, her eyes meeting his with the same intelligent gaze that had marked their first encounter 15 years ago. The moment of recognition between them was palpable, a connection that bridged species and time. Tommy settled into the snow beside her, maintaining a respectful distance but close enough to share the space. Then, in a gesture that would be studied and discussed for years to come, he made the huffing sound that had become their shared language. The elderly bear responded with a series of gentle vocalizations that the audio equipment captured as having unique tonal qualities never before recorded in Ursine communication. For the next hour, as the winter twilight deepened into dusk, Tommy and the bear appeared to be engaged in what Dr. Rodriguez would later describe as a cross-species dialogue. The surrounding bears maintained their formation, occasionally adding their own vocalizations to create what seemed to be a complex, multi-layered conversation. Researchers monitoring the bear's brain activity through non-invasive sensors recorded synchronized patterns that suggested a shared emotional experience. As darkness fell, the research team employed their newest technology, a specialized thermal imaging system that could detect subtle changes in body temperature and movement patterns. What they observed defied existing understanding of animal behavior. The gathered bears began to emit synchronized thermal signatures, their body temperatures rising and falling in patterns that created what Dr. Chen described as a biological symphony. The elderly bear's final moments were marked by a peace and purpose that touched everyone present. She maintained eye contact with Tommy until the very end, her gaze clear and conscious. In her last act, she reached out one paw and gently touched the base of the bronze sculpture, her claws making a soft scraping sound against the metal. The gesture seemed to carry profound significance, a final connection between the physical memorial of her heroic act and the living legacy she had created. The moment of her passing was marked by an extraordinary display of collective behavior. The gathered bears raised their heads in unison and released a series of low, harmonic vocalizations that created what the audio equipment recorded as a perfect musical chord. The sound resonated through the winter air, carrying across the sanctuary and echoing off the distant mountains. Wildlife experts would later confirm that nothing like it had ever been documented in the natural world. Tommy remained with the elderly bear until the end, his presence a bridge between the human and animal worlds she had worked so hard to connect. As her breathing slowed and finally stopped, the younger bears maintained their circular formation, but began a slow, rhythmic swaying motion that created patterns in the freshly fallen snow. Thermal imaging showed their body temperatures synchronizing one final time in what appeared to be a coordinated response to the moment. The scientific implications of these events were staggering. The gathered bears' behavior demonstrated levels of social organization, emotional processing, and intentional communication that shattered existing paradigms of animal consciousness. Dr. Rodriguez's team had captured irrefutable evidence of what they termed collective consciousness expression, a phenomenon that suggested bears were capable of shared emotional experiences and coordinated responses that had previously been attributed only to humans and a few highly social primate species. In the days following the elderly bear's passing, the scientific community witnessed an unprecedented phenomenon that would reshape our understanding of animal mourning behaviors. The bears who had gathered for her final teaching continued to return to the site in smaller groups, each following a precise pattern of movement that matched the original formation. Dr. Rodriguez's team documented how these groups would arrive at specific times throughout the day, suggesting a sophisticated level of social organization and time awareness that challenged existing theories about ursine cognitive capabilities. The younger bears, particularly those who had been part of the inner circle, began demonstrating behaviors that clearly showed they had internalized their matriarch's final lessons. They were observed teaching these same behaviors to their own cubs, using the same careful, deliberate movements and vocalizations that she had employed. More remarkably, they added their own innovations to these teachings, suggesting not just the preservation of knowledge, but its active evolution. Tommy's role in the sanctuary evolved in unexpected ways following these events. His unique connection with the bears, culminating in his presence during the elderly bear's final moments, had demonstrated possibilities for human-wildlife interaction that no one had previously imagined. Universities around the world began developing new research programs based on what they termed the Pine Valley Protocol, an approach to wildlife study that emphasized respectful coexistence and recognition of animal intelligence. Clara, watching her son navigate this new frontier of human-animal understanding, found herself reflecting on how far they had come from that terrifying morning on the train tracks. She devoted herself to establishing the International Center for Cross-Species Communication, a groundbreaking institution that brought together researchers from diverse fields including animal behavior, neuroscience, linguistics, and indigenous knowledge. The center's first major symposium, titled Bridges Between Worlds, Lessons from the Mother Bear, attracted participants from 67 countries. Dr. Jessica Chen's continued monitoring of the bear population revealed something extraordinary in the months following the matriarch's passing. The bears began using the sanctuary's teaching areas in organized shifts, with different family groups taking turns demonstrating safety behaviors to their cubs. Through careful DNA analysis, her team confirmed that these groups represented distinct maternal lines descending from the original mother bear, each maintaining specific variations in their teaching styles while preserving the core knowledge she had passed down. The sanctuary's acoustic research team, led by Dr. Marcus Thompson, made a breakthrough discovery that sent ripples through the scientific community. Using advanced spectral analysis of the vocalizations recorded during the elderly bear's final gathering, they identified complex patterns that matched the mathematical structures found in human language. The bears were not just making sounds, they were communicating through a sophisticated system of layered meanings, with individual variations that suggested personal expression within a shared framework. Tommy's 18th birthday arrived in the spring following these events, and with it came an observation that seemed to complete a circle of understanding. A young female bear, confirmed through genetic testing to be a direct descendant of the original mother bear, was observed teaching her cubs near the bronze sculpture. As Tommy approached the observation area, The bear paused in her demonstration and made a series of vocalizations that perfectly matched the patterns recorded from her great-grandmother during that final December gathering. The international research community, which had maintained a continuous presence at the sanctuary since the extraordinary December events, documented what they termed transgenerational memory transmission, the passing of specific memories and learned behaviors across multiple generations of bears. This phenomenon went far beyond simple instinct or learned behavior, suggesting a level of cultural preservation that had never been observed in non-human species. Dr. Rodriguez's team, collaborating with neuroscientists from leading research institutions, began using new non-invasive imaging techniques to study the bear's brain activity during these teaching sessions. The results revealed neural patterns that mirrored those observed in human brains during complex problem-solving and emotional processing. More surprisingly, they found evidence of synchronized brain activity between bears during their teaching sessions, suggesting a form of shared consciousness that challenged fundamental assumptions about animal cognition. The implications of these discoveries began to ripple outward from Pine Valley in ways that would fundamentally reshape humanity's relationship with the natural world. Universities across the globe started revising their biology and ecology curricula to incorporate what became known as the Pine Valley paradigm. The recognition that animal intelligence and consciousness existed on a spectrum far more complex than previously imagined. The term bear mind entered the scientific lexicon, describing a form of intelligence that combined emotional awareness with practical problem-solving in ways that sometimes surpassed human capabilities in certain areas. Tommy's acceptance into Harvard's newly established Department of Interspecies Communication marked a turning point in academic history. The department, created specifically to study and expand upon the lessons learned from the Pine Valley bears, brought together experts from fields as diverse as animal behavior, linguistics, psychology, and indigenous knowledge. Tommy's unique perspective as someone who had experienced direct communication with the bears from childhood became an invaluable resource in developing new methodologies for understanding animal consciousness. Clara's legal work continued to push boundaries in unexpected ways. Her advocacy led to the establishment of the World Court for Species Rights, a revolutionary institution that considered cases involving animal intelligence and conservation. The court's first major ruling, which granted special protected status to populations showing advanced cognitive capabilities, used the Pine Valley bears as its primary precedent. This decision would go on to influence environmental law and conservation efforts worldwide. Dr. Rodriguez's team made another breakthrough when they began studying the subtle variations in the bears' teaching methods across different family lines. Each maternal lineage, they discovered, had developed its own unique dialect of movements and vocalizations while maintaining the core safety behaviors taught by the original mother bear. This discovery suggested a level of cultural development that paralleled human societies in some ways while following its own distinct evolutionary path. The sanctuary itself evolved into what scientists termed a living laboratory of consciousness. The bears, now accustomed to human observation but maintaining their wild nature, began demonstrating increasingly sophisticated behaviors. One particularly remarkable incident occurred when a group of young bears was observed using fallen branches to create simple tools for accessing food, a behavior that spread rapidly through the population through their established teaching networks. Sarah Williams, working with a team of technology specialists, developed a groundbreaking system for mapping the bears' social networks. Using advanced AI analysis of movement patterns and vocalizations, they created what they called the Bear Social Web, a complex visualization of relationships, teaching lineages, and communication patterns that revealed an intricate society operating just beyond human perception. The visualization showed how information and behaviors flowed through the bear community, adapting and evolving while maintaining core principles established by the original mother bear. A profound moment of validation came during an unexpected natural disaster. When wildfires threatened the sanctuary during a particularly dry summer, the bears demonstrated an extraordinary level of organized response. Multiple family groups worked together to lead younger bears to safety, using the same careful coordination they had shown during the elderly matriarch's final gathering. More remarkably, several bears were observed guiding other wildlife species away from danger, suggesting a level of altruistic behavior that extended beyond their own species. Tommy's research began to focus on what he termed inherited wisdom, the way the bears passed down not just behaviors but underlying principles of interaction with humans and other animals. Working with Dr. Chen, he documented how young bears learned to assess human intentions and emotions, showing a sophisticated understanding of human body language and vocal tones. This ability, clearly inherited from the original mother bear's example, suggested a form of emotional intelligence that had been continuously refined across generations. The international scientific community was particularly intrigued by the bears' growing technological awareness. The younger generations showed an intuitive understanding of the sanctuary's safety systems, including the train warning mechanisms and observation equipment. Rather than avoiding these human installations, the bears incorporated them into their teaching sessions, demonstrating to their cubs how to interpret and utilize these tools while maintaining a safe distance. This adaptation suggested a level of cognitive flexibility that challenged traditional views of wild animals as being merely reactive to human encroachment.